Thank you all for coming on a Monday evening. We weren't sure how many people were going to come to this. We had been hearing in some of my travels throughout my district and District 3, had been hearing from folks from Gold River up to Foothill Farms and Arden Arcade about traffic. We always hear about traffic safety concerns, right? Which is what this is about. But a lot of the complaints were about e-bikes. Complaints, but also questions: what's allowed, what's not allowed, who has responsibility for enforcing the law, about e-bikes, what is being done to improve the situation. So that was kind of the genesis of this idea to have a community meeting specifically to talk about traffic safety with an emphasis on e-bikes. And it also got extended not only to the Highway Patrol, because as you know, they handle all the traffic-related jurisdiction in the unincorporated parts of Sacramento County, my former colleagues here who I'll introduce in a moment, but then also a lot of questions and concerns about what's allowed, what's not allowed on the American River Parkway. And so we have our Regional Parks Director, Liz Bellis, here with Sergeant Acting Commander Schnitzius. Close enough? Yeah. Close enough. Here to talk about specifically about what's going on the Parkway and some recent changes to our county ordinance and some of the things they're doing out there. But I, as a former member of the Highway Patrol, traffic safety is obviously something that is near and dear to my heart. And I've seen the impacts of what happens when people are not driving safely, riding safely, and I think we're all feeling some of that in our communities. And actually the North Division CHP Commander, Jamie Kenyon, Jamie, raise your hand, is here. So she is in charge of the CHP office on Madison and Date over here. They handle almost all of my district with the exception of Fair Oaks and Gold River. That's handled by a different CHP office. But Jamie and I actually worked in the Highway Patrol. One of my last assignments was as the legislative liaison for the CHP. And that was about, 10 years ago. And that was about the time that the legislature was making a lot of changes in the law relating to electric bicycles, mopeds, motorcycles, essentially allowing a lot of different modes of transportation that had not previously been allowed under the California Vehicle Code. And I remember as the CHP's ledge guy, Jamie and I got into a lot of meetings with legislators and the governor's office about, okay, what does the Highway Patrol think about this? How is this going to work? And one of our concerns all along was, hey, if you are legalizing all of these things without appropriate guardrails, it's going to cause some confusion by the users, by the parents who are buying them for the users, certainly by people in the community, and for law enforcement agencies. And that's I think what we have been seeing over the years. After we hear from Jamie and Liz Bellis and our Parks District Commander, Ranger Commander, I'll talk a little bit about some of the legislative efforts that are ongoing. And I know some of you may have some other insight about some of the legislation that's being pursued to address the issue. But this is not strictly limited to e-bikes, so I want to be clear about that. What we're going to do tonight is, because we do have a large crowd, I'm going to ask you if you have a comment or a question, put it on one of these note cards. And Vanessa from my office, I have Vanessa, Kendra, and Iris from my office. They have cards if you want to ask a question or make a comment. That's a way to kind of keep, I think, the conversation moving better and avoid some redundant questions. If I have two questions about the same thing, I'm just obviously going to ask one of them, and I'm going to try to group them together when we get to the Q&A portion. To make sure that we're talking about the e-bikes, and then if there's other traffic safety related issues, we can talk about that. I also want to recognize Mackenzie. Where are you? Raise your hand. So we have Mackenzie, one of our principal engineers at, what is it? Senior planning engineer from our Department of Transportation here. I'm not going to put Mackenzie on the spot necessarily to come speak up here, but it is true that a lot of our traffic safety measures are not just about enforcement. When I was in the CHP, it was kind of the 3 E's: enforcement, engineering, and education. Education is a big part of it, but so is engineering. And engineering could be everything from how the roadway is designed, what kind of traffic signals you have, what kind of markings you have, speed bumps. Lori, where are you? Back there somewhere. So Mackenzie's here also to to maybe answer some questions if those come up, and also to take notes about issues you're seeing in your neighborhood. So the way this is going to go is I'll go to Jamie, Captain Kenyon here, to talk about kind of the CHP's role, what you're seeing, what you're doing, and then we'll hear from Liz and our Ranger Commander about that very thing, and then we'll move into Q&A. So thank you again for being here. I think based on just this turnout, we may do another one of these at some point, maybe later this summer, if we can squeeze it in. I try to do a lot of these community meetings on different topics, but this is clearly one that is important to all of you. So with that, Captain Kenyon, I'll give you the floor, and you're going to need to use the microphone because the room goes way in the back. Do you want all your folks up here? Or?
Yeah, you coming up in case there's something that comes up that they know a lot more than I do. So again, I want to echo what Supervisor Desmond has said. Thank you very much for being here. As he said, my name is Jamie. I'm the Captain Commander of CHP's North Sacramento area. And again, we're in charge of all the traffic responsibilities in unincorporated Sac County, which includes bicycles and the like. So what we wanted to do is just kind of give a quick overview on the bicycles themselves. There's a lot of confusion on what's a class 1, what's a class 2, what's a class 3. So I want to kind of give a quick crash course in that. And then if you were able to, I only made 50 copies, I apologize, but I can email this to you if you guys want to stick around and give me your email address so that you can have access. This is something that my office put together. Actually, Sergeant Reed is responsible for putting this document together to kind of give a dumbed down version of some of the laws that we deal with quite frequently to make it more easy for parents to understand what's going on. So class 1 bicycle. A class 1 bicycle is your regular pedaled bicycle, right? It's only going to go up to 20 miles an hour, and it's the pedal assisted. A class 2 bicycle can be either pedal assisted or throttle. So a class 2 bicycle also can only go up to 20 miles per hour, but a rider can ride it with just a throttle. So they never have to pedal. And that bike only can go up to 20. Now, class 3 is where we're seeing a lot of the dangerous activities that are coming around. So the class 3s can go all the way up to 28 miles per hour. So on some of these residential streets where the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, you have bicyclists that are easily able to exceed the posted speed limit for vehicles. So a class 3 bicycle that goes up to 28 miles per hour will not have a throttle. It is clearly pedal assisted. But by using that pedal assist, it generates enough wattage to get the bicycle up to 28 miles per hour. So some of the things that are also important for class 3s is that you have to be 16 years old to ride them. So if you are under 16, you cannot ride a class 3. So you have to be 16, and everybody, even adults, have to wear a helmet, no matter the age. So those are some of the big differentiations between the bicycle classes. 1 second, I'm gonna grab my stats here. So I wanted to just touch on a few of the stats. Orange County is doing an excellent job of trying to gather all the statistics that go around with the injuries that we're seeing. And this is for preventable injuries to children. So we're looking at under 18 years of age. So UC Davis has taken that information and kind of made it their own. So I'm just going to give you some stats, and this is specific to UC Davis. And these are injuries that they're seeing. Again, they're all preventable. They're all e-bikes or e-scooters, and they capture people who have come to the hospital for treatment and been released, or people that have been hospitalized. So the stats that we're missing are people that have been injured that just did their own treatment at home, individuals that went to an urgent care, or individuals that went to their primary care physician. So all of those are not included in these stats. So in 2025 in Sacramento, falls are still the #1 at UC Davis that people are seeing with injuries to kids. Down in Orange County, the #1 injury are e-bike crashes. So that hasn't gotten that far up here yet. But e-scooters, so falls, we had 600 that were seen at UC Davis. E-scooters accounted for 79, and e-bikes accounted for 68. The majority of all of these kids are 14 years of age, and they're mostly males. So 3 out of every 4 riders are males that are being hurt, and almost the majority of them are right around 13 or 14, with the majority of 14. And that's consistent up here at Davis and consistent down in Orange County. So I know I've touched a little bit on the e-bikes, but also the e-scooters. If you see if you're downtown or a more populated area, you see a lot of those Lime scooters, the green and white ones that you can just rent and ride around. So those are also illegal for anybody under 16. You have to be at least 16 to ride those. So I'm gonna turn it over to the sergeant here, and he's gonna touch on some of the efforts that the CHP officers behind me here that you see are doing. We're going out to schools and we're actually walking superintendents and principals through their bike line so that they can be like, hey, that's illegal, they can't have that, they can't have that. Because if they're under 16, they can't have those scooters. So you have parents that don't understand the rules that are buying these for their kids, and they can't even be on them. So we're trying to do a concerted effort to educate the public and educate the parents. And so I thank Supervisor Desmond for having this meeting, because this is where it all starts. The more education we can get out there, we can prevent some of these injuries, because we all have a shared responsibility, whether we're bicyclists or we're cars or we're pedestrians. So we want to make sure that we understand the laws that are out there and understand what we can and can't do. I see your hand, and I'll get to you just real quick. The last thing before I turn it over is I want to touch on the e-motorcycles. So that is probably the number one problem we're seeing in my office are the e-motorcycles. So these are just the electric motorcycles. These are absolutely illegal to ride on any street anywhere. They cannot be registered by the DMV, and they are not street legal. And the problem is they're all kids on these, and then when we try to pull them over and take any kind of enforcement action, they often run from us. So we're getting into pursuits with these motorcycles with 13 and 14, and we actually had a 12-year-old that ran from us. And we don't know who's on this motorcycle. We just pull them over to educate them. We're now beginning to impound these. So if we pull them over and catch them, we're taking them. So it's gonna cost mom and dad money to come get them out of impound. But the first and foremost, we wanna educate so that they understand that, so we don't ever get to that point. Go ahead, sir.
I wanted to ask you, when it comes to crash statistics, have you looked at the Mineta Transportation Institute report that came out late last year?
I have not.
Okay, it doesn't compare to...
We're doing questions on a car.
Okay.
The e-bike crashes are half of what e-scooters are, 5 to 6 times less than analog bike crashes.
Yeah.
If we really want to do more about public health, it's the cars.
Okay. Appreciate it. We'll keep moving on. I did want to point out one thing before. So this sheet that I handed off, we've already had 2 mistakes that were pointed out to us. So if you look on class 3 e-bikes and e-scooters, we have on here that yes, you can use those on a class 1 bike path. So our Sacramento County have actually by ordinance not allowed that. So that's another thing that we'll have to update on here. So what we're gonna have to do, depending on where you live and where you're riding, you need to make sure you check with your local ordinances and make sure that there's not a local ordinance that prohibits this. So the class 3 e-bike and the e-scooter are not allowed to be used on a class 1 bike on the American River Parkway by local ordinance. So I want to turn it over to Sergeant Greg Reed. Again, he's a sergeant in our office, and he oversees our problem-oriented policing team.
And so, Jamie, before you walk away, can I ask you a question? Yeah. If someone has, now, not everybody got a copy of this chart she's referring to, correct? Right. Some did not. We'll get more copies, and we can, I don't know how we can link to that, Vanessa, if you want to get okay. We do have another chart here on the table. It doesn't have all the information yours does. But I think you mentioned either OTS or on CHP's website. Where can people find more information like this?
So again, I'll give you an email address that we'll be able to send this to, that you can get this whole packet. On the very last page, there's a QR code, and we'll stick around after if anybody wants to come and snap a pic. This is actually going to take you to CHP's e-bike, bicycle safety and training. So this was a legislatively required class that they asked the CHP to come up with so that, number one, we can educate the public on e-bikes. And this was several years ago when they were coming out quite faster than the law could keep up with them. And then also for kids that get cited, this is one of the things that they have to do to basically get rid of the ticket, is that they have to attend this class. So they have to go on and take this class, and it's an educational safety class. So again, that's the QR code on the back page, but I'll make sure everyone has that before we leave today. Yeah.
Hi, Sergeant Greg Reed, CHP, North Sacramento. I'm in charge of our POP team. These are my POP officers behind me. What we do as the POP team is problem-oriented policing. We're your police force, basically. So Sacramento CHP is very unique, how that we have more unincorporated area than pretty much any other CHP office in the state. And with that, you guys have unique concerns and issues that come up. And the number one complaint we have from you guys right now is the e-bikes. So with that, any complaints you have, our email to directly come to us, and myself and my 3 officers all have access to this email that we check at least 3 times a day, is 250POP at chp.ca.gov. That goes directly to us, and we are very responsive on it. We Monday through Friday, we try to get back to you within hours, if not sooner. So any concerns you have, whether they're e-bikes or traffic or pedestrians or panhandlers, please send those to us and we will respond to you. And also, along with, if you did not get a packet today, email that email and we will get you one right away through the email. So some of the efforts we're doing to combat the e-bikes, the e-bikes right now we are actually working with, it's 250POP, so it's 250POP at chp.ca.gov. So we're partnering with schools, specifically right now San Juan Unified and other neighboring schools, and we are actually going to the schools and pointing out to the teachers and the administration of what's legally allowed and what's not allowed at the schools. The biggest one people do not know about is the e-scooters. People are buying these for their children, and you are not allowed to be on one unless you're 16 years of age with a driver's license. I know the San Juan Unified School District Board recently, they were surprised to learn that, and a couple of them had purchased them for their children, and they were shocked to hear that information because they had no idea that wasn't allowed. So that's the biggest part we're doing right now is education. We also try to do as much enforcement as possible, but as the captain alluded to, it can be very tricky because the last thing we want to do is get into a high-speed chase with a 13-year-old or 14-year-old and for them to run a stop sign with us, and next thing you know, we're taken into the hospital. So we have to weigh those odds for the betterment of everybody. And so sometimes we just have to not chase them, try and track them down later. We have done that, worked with the schools to identify the children, and it's worked quite well. But we have caught several through pursuits, and luckily so far every one of them has ended safely. That's our biggest goal, is the safety of everybody. That is the one reason why we're focusing on the e-bikes, is because these children are going faster than ever now, and when they do crash, they're getting seriously injured. I've been to multiple, just in the past month, to where these children had major injuries. And so, yes, sir, there might be other things that you're seeing more crashes from, but these e-bike and e-scooter collisions are actually causing the most injuries to children. So that is one thing that we're focused on. And one thing we want to combat is the children with these scooters. My POP team, do you guys have any questions or anything you want to put out?
I do want to say one more thing. So what we're seeing down south, I don't know, and I apologize if it has happened up here, but in Southern California, the DAs down there are now starting to charge parents with some of these crimes. So it's only a matter of time, if it's not here, that it'll eventually come up here, but it has become such a prolific problem with the e-bikes and the e-scooters and the pedestrians and just being responsible shared roadway users, that the parents are being charged for child endangerment, child neglect, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So just keep that in thought too.
Great. So
email address one more time.
250POP at chp.ca.gov. 250POP at chp.ca.gov. And I will attest to the fact that they are very responsive, and whether it's e-bikes or someone speeding in your neighborhood, blowing through a stop sign in your neighborhood, they will get on it. They will go out there and do some targeted enforcement. If you can get a license plate, maybe an identification of the driver, location, time of day, day of the week, that's always really helpful as well. But use them. People don't. the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You've got to report this stuff. And the CHP, we just had a meeting. Actually, Senator Neal and I just hosted a meeting with the CHP's legislative liaison and someone from their division that oversees Jamie's office and others, asking for more enforcement in these unincorporated areas, because it has not historically been a priority for the Highway Patrol, but they all do a great job, and they get sick and tired of hearing from me. I want them to hear from you as well in your community, so thank you. And a lot of the questions I have here we'll be following up on some of the things they brought up. But before we do that, because it bleeds into some things on the Parkway, I want to now turn it over to Liz Bellis, our Regional Park Director, Sacramento County Regional Parks. Thank you for being here, Liz.
You're welcome. Commander Francisco, come on up. Good evening, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so hello, nice to see you all. Yes, we have done some additional changes to our county parks ordinances, which also can be adopted by your local park districts if they so choose, just FYI. So what we have done is they will be going into effect on June 12th of this year, and we have changed the what can happen. So rather than just being infractions, they can also be up to a misdemeanor if the conditions warrant. So that is for anyone who is using an illegal e-bike, an e-moto, or a modified illegal bike on our park system. It can be up to a misdemeanor. We're also using that to address some of the damage we've seen to our natural areas, where we've had folks that are building bike jumps and other things and destroying our natural resources. So that again can be up to a misdemeanor. And also our golf courses and our sports fields have been getting some damage. Again, that's a brand new ordinance, but we're trying to address that problem. Additionally, we have a partnership with our Department of Transportation, Department of Public Health, and First Five, where we're working on developing some educational materials for kids and for parents that will be a little bit more fun, if you will, to try and really get that message home. Again, emphasizing on what is allowed, what is not allowed, and to really get the kids educated and the parents educated so they're keeping their kids safe. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Commander Schnitzius, see if you want to add anything to what we're doing.
It's rough going to be the last person. Usually everybody said everything that needs to be said. So all I can echo is the same things that the captain mentioned from CHP, except we're experiencing those same issues in our parkway, and so we are addressing those as we come across them. We have had situations where we already have impounded e-motos and some of the illegally modified e-bikes. They are not allowed in the parkway. So we are taking enforcement action. We're looking for opportunities to potentially partner with our CHP law enforcement friends to conduct enforcement actions in the parkway, because as much as it's problematic on the street, it's as problematic in our parkway, because you have vehicle-bicycle interactions. We're having pedestrian, bicyclist interactions, and people end up getting hurt just as bad, if not worse, in our parkway. So we are actively looking for those folks who are violating the rules, and as Director Bellis had mentioned, now we have a little bit more of a hammer if need be, in the form of it's not just an infraction like a traffic ticket, it could actually be a misdemeanor offense. So we're looking forward to taking more progressive and proactive action in the parkway to keep everybody safe.
Thank you. So stick around here, Jamie, you too, because we'll start with the questions in a moment. So if you look at this chart, it tells you right here, I mean, you can see how confusing this whole legislative scheme is, because you have different classes of bikeways, which gets confusing, all these different classes of vehicles, electric vehicles that can be used in different places, and it's you can see why it's a struggle for enforcement. It's amazing how many local enforcement agencies, whether it's city or the highway patrol or park rangers, they get confused about this because it's relatively new and it's inherently confusing. I did have a chance to talk today. I looked at some of the legislation that is that is going through the process right now. There's about 4 bills that are still alive. I hear maybe 2 of these may end up becoming law, and they kind of nibble around the edges a little bit, but they accomplish a few different things. I think one of them that is probably the most promising is, I'm going to looking at my notes because I had a long discussion with the legislative director for the California League of Cities. And the one that's probably the best is to reclassify some of these electric bikes to require more consistency in terms of registration and licensing and manufacturer liability. We are seeing some manufacturers getting sued by people, and some of these lawsuits have been making their way through the process. And actually, I was told today, I don't know if this is true, if you've seen this, it's hard to buy some of these, depending on the class, even on Amazon anymore. It's not as easy to get them as it was kind of the Wild West for a few years. And I think both third-party sellers and manufacturers are realizing that they have some real liability concerns with these things. There's another bill that would require or allow only one rider on these devices or vehicles, depending on which class it is. There was one that would standardize the equipment that has to be on each one of them, and there's another bill that would require specific training for use of these, because they're right now I don't think there's any legislatively mandated training for any of them when you first buy one of these bikes. So that's something to consider. I'm also told that the law does allow local jurisdictions to impose some regulatory measures, and I'm told Orange County, the entire county is pursuing an ordinance right now. I don't know if that's unincorporated county, frankly, or it would apply to the entire county, that would not allow anybody 12 and under to use any of these within the jurisdiction. So local municipalities, counties, and cities are starting to pay more attention to this. They're all struggling with how to address it. But I think, hopefully we'll see what the legislature can come up with. So I'm going to go through these questions. Vanessa, let's not collect any more because we're not going to have enough time. I have too many questions here. Most of them are about e-bikes, so I'll try to keep all those together, and then we have a few other outlier questions that kind of go beyond that. The first one, I know we do have some young people in the audience, and this is a question, Jamie, you alluded to it when you talked about pulling people over. How will you stop under 16-year-olds from buying and riding on the Class 3 or an e-motor on the streets? I'll let you respond to this. I mean, buying them, I don't know if there's anything you can do specifically.
Yeah, so the biggest push right now is education, right? Because the kids that are that young probably aren't buying them themselves. They're getting them as Christmas presents, birthday presents, and their parents or a loved one is buying it for them. So we're trying to educate those individuals so that they know what's safe and what's legal for the children that are out there. It's kind of a lot. We hear it a lot about if it's illegal, why are they allowed to sell it? And the biggest analogy that I can use is like window tint, right? It's not illegal to buy window tint. It just can't be on specific windows. So the same thing, it's not illegal to buy these e-bikes. They just have to be used appropriately, responsibly, and by the right individuals.
Yeah, that's good. And don't go too far. So you talked about this. I want you to flesh it because there were a few questions on this, and maybe someone wrote them down before you went over it. But the question about why are driver licenses not required for Class 1, 2, or 3 e-bikes? That's not the case. Go over that a little bit more. What are the driver's license requirements for the different class of vehicles?
So I'm going to have Sergeant Reed come up here with me too, because I know he deals a lot with this, but you have to have a driver's license to operate an e-scooter. So if we're talking about the class of bicycles, you don't need a driver's license for the class of bicycles. You do once you get to an e-scooter. Lime? Yes, like Lime. That's the biggest that everyone's familiar with in this area are the Lime. But you also, there's ones that they sell at Costco and Walmart that are the bigger. It's based on the wattage of the motor. And those are all driver's license required.
Regardless of how fast it goes. If it's powered by electricity or a battery, because they're everywhere.
Yes.
Driven by small kids, and they have to have driver's licenses by California law.
So, and that also includes like those little hoverboards. So those aren't as prevalent as they were several years ago, but the little where you just stand on them and you use the forward or backward motion to turn, those also now require a driver's license. And a lot of the legislation, I know it's really confusing, but technology is so much faster than our legislative process. So all of this stuff is coming out faster than we can keep up with it. So that's why these pages look like they do, and there's all these different charts, because it's really hard to manage this and make sure everyone stays safe. So we're just trying to stay up with technology, and it's very fast.
So that would include electric skateboards.
Yes.
Electric skateboards, same thing. You see these boards with one wheel, and then you see electric skateboards where someone is just maybe holding a little remote control. They have to have a driver's license.
Yes, sir.
And by definition, if they're under 16,
They can't.
they
Yeah.
cannot have a driver's license.
Yeah.
So,
So.
all right, yeah. No, obviously technology works much faster than our legislators. Okay, Jamie, if a child is riding his or her e-bike through traffic, breaking several laws, and does not stop, what would happen if you saw him, if he was seen by one of your officers?
This is a juvenile?
If a child, yes.
Okay.
What is our recourse and then what is the public's recourse if they see that happening? And someone said it just happened today at Fair Oaks and Landis right here down the street.
So we have a couple different options that are available to us. Officers are given a great leeway of discretion, and we allow them to take a couple different. They can absolutely write the child a citation, but it basically, when they write the citation, they're going to label it as a parent's responsibility. So when it comes to the office, there's a letter that I write that I send out to the parents, which basically tells them that on this day at this time, we stopped your child, this is what we had. The officer sometimes will take the child to the house, walk the child to their house if they're nearby, and talk to the parents and educate the parents. Most of the time, the parents don't even know. So it's just taking that extra effort. We aren't in the business of going out there and finding kids and writing citations and trying to hit them financially. We just want everybody to be safe. And especially with the pedestrians and the cars and the bikes, even if a bicyclist is not at fault, if they're in a collision, especially with a motor vehicle, they're going to be hurt. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, here's a question. Some of these are a little bit redundant, or Jamie already covered it, but Class 2 bike can be modified to 60 miles per hour faster, or to go faster than 20 miles per hour. They are sold at 20, but then can be reprogrammed to 40 miles per hour. What do you do in that situation, and why is this not considered an e-motorcycle at that point?
So some of the modifications that they do will make this an e-motorcycle. So as soon as and it's really unfortunate because you can go watch a 5-minute YouTube video and be able to modify these to go 60 miles per hour. So it's really kind of scary what's out there right now, but as soon as it's modified, it's illegal, right? Like any kind of those modifications wipes it off. And I know, Greg, if you want to talk to any more about that.
Yeah, basically the second it's modified, it becomes an e-motorcycle and no longer meets the requirements for the Class 1 or Class 2 or Class 3. And so then you have to have a driver's license. You cannot be on the roadways, has to be on special designated areas only, almost like an off-highway vehicle at that point. So they just can't, the second they're modified, you're off the road. But again, for us, it's hard to determine which are modified and which are not, because we might see them going 18 miles an hour, that thing really goes 60. We would have no clue until we see them going faster.
There's a couple questions here about, and again, this all speaks to the confusion about this legislative scheme. A couple questions about the pedal operations and what e-bikes are pedals optional? And which bikes are pedals required? I mean, if I see something with pedals, is it automatically an e-bike? And if it doesn't have pedals, it's an e-motorcycle? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely.
The pedal assist.
For your bicycles, obviously you have your traditional bicycle. We all know like what a traditional bicycle. All bicycles are going to have pedals. If the pedals are removed, then they're no longer an e-bicycle. They have to have pedals. The difference is a Class 1 is a pedal assisted up to 20 miles per hour. So that's as fast as it can go, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a boost when you do your pedals. A Class 2, you don't have to pedal. It has a throttle, usually a thumb throttle, and that still tops out at 20 miles per hour. So on a Class 2, you don't have to pedal, you can just throttle it up to 20 miles per hour. A Class 3 does not have a throttle, but it can go pedal assisted up to 28. So trying to make this as easy as possible. They all have pedals. They all are pedal assisted, 1 and 2 go to 20. Class 3s go to 28. What else did I miss? So I'm trying to make that as easy as possible. So the only one that you don't have to pedal that will still go is their class 2. And anything modified to that makes it in that e-motorcycle, and those are unable to be registered with the DMV and makes them absolutely illegal on our highways, pathways, sidewalks, everything.
Okay. Now we get to give a chance to Liz and the sergeant or the commander here to weigh in. This is questions about e-traffic on the levees, where motorized vehicles of any kind, including electric bikes, are prohibited without a permit. Can you talk a little bit about that prohibition? Is that from the county? Is that from the flood control district? And talk about enforcement a little bit. I know you touched on it. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the tops of the levees?
So the tops of the levees are not actual bike trails themselves. And so, but we know that people are out there, they're using them. And the different agencies, the different flood control agencies have different feelings on whether or not you should be on the levee tops. Some of them are kind of okay with it. Some of them absolutely say, no, you shouldn't be on them at all. But it's not something that we're out there enforcing as far as telling people they're not supposed to be on there, because people are recreating on them with bikes and pedestrians as well.
So then, Liz, would that be, RD 1000 has jurisdiction over those? I mean, who would handle, who would be the primary responsibility for enforcement there?
So
Could CHP enforce on the top of a levee?
They could. We could also enforce if the agencies reached out to us and said, we want you to strictly enforce the levee tops and not allow anyone on them. We could enforce on that. So it's RD 1000. It's American River Flood Control District. Sac Suburban doesn't have any levees, but there's a few different agencies that have levees within the American River Parkway.
All right, and I will follow up with them. Will you take a note about that, Vanessa, RD 1000 and the other American River Flood Control District? Okay, we talked a little bit about education. Can you talk? And you talked about what San Juan is doing. What about other school districts and educational efforts to educate people in their students and their parents about the rules and other educational efforts throughout the state, whether it's OTS or go ahead, you can start locally.
So, like I said, we do have a public outreach campaign that we're working on right now that we will be getting out to. It'll be targeted towards parents and to students. Look for that probably late this summer. Again, we're trying to design it. It'll be social media. So we're developing, like I said, it's going to look a little bit less government-y, if you will. No offense. So that it'll hopefully appeal to the younger generations and also to the parents, so they can kind of relate to it and they can bring something out and show their kids. So we're working on, it'll have a nice logo, a nice look and feel consistent that we can bring out to everyone and put up signage in our parks and that type of outreach and education.
So some of what we're seeing with our school districts is they are looking to actively ban certain class of bikes from even being on the school grounds. They have that authority and they've had meetings. I know recently we went and spoke at one San Juan Unified School District, basically because just trying to educate them as well, and they wanted the input from law enforcement. But I know there are schools in Placer County, I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, but they're just outright banning the e-scooters and the class 3 bikes, and then they're only allowing certain ones so that they don't even have to deal with the kids and not being on the right bicycle and not being safe.
How about, as OTS, the State Office of Traffic Safety, do they have any grant-funded educational programs?
So we do have a bicycle and pedestrian safety grant that we are allocated through OTS. That's operated out of our headquarters office. So usually we get involved because we're allocated certain hours that we can go out and do. And we did a couple weeks ago when we opened at Fulton El Camino Park, a shared roadway space. Some of that grant money was used on that project. But we do have where we go out and try to do these, we call them rodeos, just to try to teach bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, and then also that shared roadway responsibility. And then we also OTS grant funds helmets. So we're able to go out and we properly fit people to their bicycles, whether you're an adult or a child, so that you know the proper alignment of the bike size. And then also if you don't have a helmet, or if you need a new helmet, whether you're a child or an adult, we'll properly fit you with a helmet and give you one for free, courtesy of grants from OTS.
I have something else to add, but I wanted to recognize we have at least one member, more than that I think, of our American River Bike Patrol here in the audience. And so they have an MOU with us. They do patrol on our trail system, but also the state parks, and I believe in El Dorado County as well.
We do the El Dorado Trail.
Yes.
Auburn and Coastal Lake SRAs.
So they have greatly expanded their volunteer efforts, and so they are a great partner with us as far as educating people out on the trail system. And you also have events occasionally where you're fitting kids with helmets and giving those out for free as well.
Absolutely, and those helmets are donated by UC Davis's child foundation.
So I didn't want to leave them out.
Good. Thank you, Liz, and thank you for the work you do. I know it's all volunteer basis and it's invaluable and kind of more dangerous with the climate we're talking about. You know, so much of this boils down to the parents. And you mentioned some prosecutors actually going after the parents for child endangerment and things like that. Have you seen that in Sacramento County? Because I do want to follow up with our community prosecutor about that very thing. Have we seen that here?
I have not,
Okay.
but I mean, there may be some that I'm not aware of, but there's been several pretty notable cases down south. And one, unfortunately, led to the death of a veteran, an 81-year-old veteran that was hit by a kid, and his mother is being charged with manslaughter.
Okay. All right. So this is a comment about two e-bikes have hit someone while walking on the bike trail, once on the levee and once on the trail itself. So obviously, I mean, you're hearing about it. It's a huge concern on the American River Parkway as well. Okay. Here's a question here about Sac County adopting the same ordinance as Marin County, that Class 2 e-bikes with throttles are classified as e-motos, and Class 2s. Anyone over 16 years old, only for people over 16 years old, have to wear helmets for all ages. So something, I'm going to hold on to this and follow up on it, because I mentioned what they're doing down in Orange County. I'm going to follow up with our county council about what else we can do locally, not just along the Parkway, which is exclusively Sac County, but something else we can maybe do county in the unincorporated parts of Sacramento County. We would not be able to, I don't think we would be able to regulate what they do within any of the cities, but we certainly could do it within the unincorporated areas of Sacramento County. But that's something I'm going to follow up on. What are some of the good local ordinances that have been adopted to maybe address some of the challenges that we're seeing on our roadways? Okay, I don't know if this is a good question about this being a national issue. What are we seeing from other communities, not just in California, but nationwide and maybe in other countries? Are we seeing any innovative things that maybe we haven't tried here or should be trying?
I'm not sure about innovation, but I was on a call with the National Recreation Park Association, and it was a good hour and a half where we spoke park districts all over the country, and they're all facing the same issue. So we were looking at some of their education materials to see what we could glean from and borrow. But I wouldn't say that there's innovative ideas. I would say that it is a nationwide issue that people are trying to address and recognize the fact that it needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Does any of that say that they're driving a deadly weapon?
I don't think so. I'm going to.
So she asked, is any of that address that the bicycle is a deadly weapon? Not to my knowledge. But as far as the charges that are being filed, the one specifically in Orange County, I apologize, I don't know if it's Orange County, I just know it's Southern California, is where the child had already been talked to by law enforcement for driving recklessly on his e-bike. And the mother was made aware on body camera that her son was driving recklessly and she could be held accountable if something happened. And then fast forward a couple months, he hit and killed an 81-year-old veteran. And so they actually are charging the mother with manslaughter because they can clearly show that she had prior knowledge that her son was driving recklessly and that it could hurt somebody, which it did. It took this man's life. So I have not seen anything about a deadly weapon, but those are pretty serious charges.
I think, litigation is going to drive a lot of the policy, I think, in terms of the limitations on what can be done. I do know also there are efforts and discussions about, as part of the legislative proposals, how do you really require these e-bikes to have very, very clear identification about what bike it is, what it's supposed to be, and have parents have to maybe sign something if they buy a bike for a minor that discloses the dangers of these bikes and if it's misused, and that they'll be held responsible for any injuries or property damage that happens as a result of it. Things, are being pursued in that vein as well. So, okay. Okay, clarification. I'm going to skip that one. Skip this one. Some of these I can't read very well. Let's move off e-bikes for a moment and talk about some other traffic safety related issues, because obviously there's a lot of traffic safety related things that are not just caused by e-bikes or e-motos. Okay, that one's about trespassing. That's not it. So let's talk about, this is speeding. This is, let's talk about engineering and whether Sac County has any plans to increase bike lane widths or provide other safe surfaces and curbs between cars and bikes. Now, Mackenzie, can you, I can comment on this a little bit, but I don't know if you want to make a statement about DOT and what some of the things we're doing to have more physically separated bike lanes?
Yes. I don't know how much you want me to say, but.
Come on up, use the microphone.
Hi, sent you on email. Hi, I'm Mackenzie Clark. I'm a senior planner, not an engineer, but I do know my way around making concept plans for bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. And I'm within the alternative modes group at DOT, so I specifically focus on bicycle pedestrian related projects consistent with the county's goals of safety for all road users, right? There's a lot of great projects that the county has currently being constructed and upcoming to include the protected bikeways or class 4 bikeways. Maybe I shouldn't use that term right now to confuse people with classes of bikes and bikeways, but anyway, having protection, the vertical physical barrier where you see the plastic delineators, it can be any material though, concrete, more permanent. Those are being built currently in the county right now. There's one on Arden Way, which is a raised sidewalk level bikeway. If you haven't seen it, it's just west of Watt Avenue on Arden Way. I believe there's class 4 bikeways going in on Fair Oaks Boulevard near the pavilions. Other projects that are funded, that are upcoming, these projects take a long time. They require a lot of times grant funding, which is competitive as well. But there's a lot of good work happening out there, trying to make more of it. And yeah, if you have questions, you can come to me.
She'll be here afterwards too. And I think, Sacramento County, especially the unincorporated areas, obviously the roadways that we have were not designed for the level of traffic or the type of users that we're seeing today, right? I mean, no one was driving an e-bike 50 years ago in Fair Oaks. And so now we're stuck, we're faced with these much different uses of our roadways, much more intense uses of our roadways, and how do we convert those roadways to have more features that are going to be safe for everybody? There's a lot of those roadways. It's very expensive to do that, and some people would rather have us say, let's just repave all the roadways first and then try to get the bells and whistles later, right? I mean, there's always a balance. My focus is on how do we get the competitive grant funding to do those larger projects along the bigger commercial corridors where traffic is going faster, and we want to have people and cyclists, pedestrians, and physically separated bike lanes where they're safe, where they can use them safely, but while at the same time trying to go as far as we can with repaving the other streets throughout the county. But that is a huge challenge, and Mackenzie will be here to talk more about that. Okay, I want to give you a chance to respond to this. The problem is not e-bikes, it is enforcement. This is about the Parkway specifically. There's a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit on the Parkway. Any competent bike rider can exceed that speed limit, whether you are a racer or a regular road bike user, a rider on a class 1, 2, or 3 bike, it doesn't matter. Please stop calling it a class 2 or 3 problem. It is a speed limit enforcement problem. Why don't you address that? As someone who's been on the bike trail my entire life, it is absolutely compounded by the presence of the class 2 and 3 bikes. But can you talk a little bit about just speed enforcement in general on the Parkway?
And Rich, it sounded like you said 50, but it's 15.
15.
Yes, 15.
15, not 50.
Is no.
People drive 50 on it. Yeah, thank you.
So sometimes in emergency situations, that is, the bike path is sometimes the easiest way to get to where we need to get to in case of water rescues and such. So you will see us sometimes going down the bike path at a good clip, but we're usually typically conscientious about the folks around us and make safe passage through there. With respect to enforcement, it's very difficult for us to enforce a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on the bike trail when we don't have the method and means to do that. Typically, CHP, I was municipal officer before I came to work for the Sac County Parks. A lot of times you have radar or LiDAR, something that you can track someone's speed with that will stand up in court if you're going to give them that citation. Our problem is we don't have those tools to be able to do that, and we don't have people that are certified in LiDAR or radar in order to go to court and testify on those. Now, do we make stops for people that are driving or riding in excess of the speed limit? Yes. Do we stop people who are riding recklessly on the bike path? Yes. We do an education piece on that, but we're not going to issue a citation that we know is not going to be enforceable in court, or it's going to just immediately get thrown out. That's a waste of the taxpayers' time and energy, the rangers' time and energy. So education, we default back to education in that sense. And just like there's speed limits on the roadway and people violate them all the time, people violate the speed limits on our bikeway, and we do our very best to try to enforce that. The bigger issue is, not the bigger issue, but a component of the issue is now you have the bicyclists are going, and some, more often than not, the pedal bicyclists are a little more cognizant of their safety and the safety of those around them, even if they're operating at a little bit of faster speed than what we're seeing with the e-bikes and the e-motos that are jumping onto the bikeway. And so, in the enforcement aspect, it's difficult to enforce because we don't have the tools necessary to collect the evidence to present in court for a conviction on that violation. But the violation does exist, it's on the books, but we typically treat it as an educational opportunity for our folks that we're contacting in the Parkway.
How can you get the tools you need to do that?
Typically that would be brought, through budgetary
resources. And Liz, are there any engineering measures on the Parkway that you've explored that might physically require people to slow down a little bit? Is there anything that you've explored or looked at? Yeah, speed table like on the park. I'm just curious. Have you? Okay.
We already have squirrels and snakes.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so this one. So there's a question about transportation funding. I'm not going to get into that because this is about traffic safety specifically, and because every year I do a series of meetings just specifically on our transportation infrastructure. Yes, we all know we have some of the worst roads in the state of California here, which is why I do a lot of meetings on those in every part of District 3. So please, if you're not signed up for my emails and my newsletter, please do that so you can participate in those meetings, because I think they're valuable. Here is, and there's a couple questions here where people are just angry and sounding off, and frankly, I'm not going to respond to some of these. If you want to come and talk to me one-on-one, I'm happy to talk to you. Here's a new one. Someone in Arden lives in Arden Park. They're seeing a lot more golf carts. Can you? And I think we're seeing them everywhere in the unincorporated area. Can you talk about the rules with the golf carts? And some are driven by very young children. Are you seeing a problem with this? And what are the rules around the golf carts?
So I actually have not heard much about the golf carts. There are designated areas within the state that I believe it's actually allowed by the CHP commissioner, and I may be wrong there, but there are designated areas that can be allocated to the use of golf carts. If you're familiar with Rancho Murrieta, that is one place that golf carts are allowed to be operated on the roadways, and you can see them driving from the communities to the grocery store and stuff. That's actually allowed, and that's in code for that. I'm not aware of any specific golf cart incidences, and if they are, golf carts cannot be on the roadways unless they're a dedicated area like Rancho Murrieta, so that would be a violation. And obviously, if you are driving a golf cart, on those. I mean, you can't. So there's really, I mean, you can't. So it wouldn't be an issue about having a driver's license or not because you can't have them on there.
What should they do if they see it?
If you see a neighbor with one, email CHP Pop. We'll come out and we will make enforcement stops.
Get a description, get a location, and they will. I mean, I don't know if you still do this, but you used to send a letter to people with the, you know, hey, we have a report of unsafe driving from a car registered to you, whatever. There are different things the CHP can do. But yeah, the bottom line is if you're seeing it in these neighborhoods like Arden Park, it is illegal, period. I think I remember that. Rancho Marietta is the only place.
I think the commissioner has the authority. They're the ones who.
Yeah. So that's good. And there's a couple other specific things in here about specific speeding issues in certain neighborhoods. CHP is going to be here after the meeting. We're going to wrap up in a moment here. They're going to be sticking around for a little while, but use that 250 POP at chp.ca.gov. Because they will respond. There are some very specific questions in here about that. Let me just make sure there isn't something else I want to hit on. There's a question here about kind of more of a public safety trespassing issue. If you see trespassing in a business somewhere, that's the jurisdiction of the Sheriff's Department primarily. CHP does get involved in that because they work very closely hand in hand with the Sheriff's Department. But I encourage you also to look at Sac County Sheriff's website and see when they do public safety community meetings. They do those, I believe, quarterly in different parts of unincorporated Sacramento County, and they're very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to stop here with this because we're out of time, but everybody is going to be sticking around. I also want to thank the Carmichael Recreation and Park District for letting us use your room. You're there in the back, so appreciate you always being so accommodating. Appreciate all of you coming out. I think I might do maybe a follow-up on this. You know, I don't know. Would you want to see more of these meetings to talk about these kinds of things? Okay. Sometimes it's hard because I'll do a meeting on something that I think people are really interested in, and 5 people will show up. You know, so but this has been a good discussion. Okay, I'm going to let you answer one question, then we're going to be done.
Real quick, the behavior isn't just children; it's got adults.
Yes.
Aggressively.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
All of these things.
Yes.
So if you can consider, I don't know what public outreach is going to be done for that, and once education and outreach is going to be enforced, because they're being extremely dangerous.
I think, look, Sacramento. There's a remark in here about Sacramento County being one of the worst places, and Jamie said the stats don't bear that out. Traffic safety is a problem everywhere in the state of California. It is not just in Sacramento County. We have to apply the education, enforcement, engineering, and continue to have conversations like this. A lot of the solution to this is you reporting it to either CHP for enforcement, us, Sac County for DOT, maybe engineering changes that we can make, and also being much more involved in educational efforts. So thank you all for being here. We will all be sticking around for a while if you have specific questions or issues.